Buried deep in his boyhood memory, he also had a product, or at least the makings of one.
I'd gotten exposed to the Snurfer as a toy when I was about 14 years old.
The Snurfer was a piece of plywood with a rope that kids surfed down a snowy hill. Burton loved the $10 toy and never forgot it.
Always in the back of my mind throughout all this stuff was, that's a sport, there's a sport there.
In 1978, he quit his job with the investment firm in New York City, moved to Londonderry, Vermont, and rented a barn for a workspace. Locals soon wondered just what the kid from New York was making in that barn. By the end of the second year, Burton was on the brink of bankruptcy.
Numbers weren't working. There was just no money coming in the door.
He tried taking his snowboards to trade shows to drum up interest.
The sort of powers of skiing, the manufacturers and so forth, they didn't want us in the trade show. You couldn't go be at that trade show and sell snowboards. They weren't allowed in the building.
Burton was frustrated, unsure what to do next. He had already blown through every penny of his inheritance. Desperate, he decided to try advertising in the ski magazines, the ads inviting readers to call for a brochure about his novel product. With funds finally coming in, Burton began manufacturing and selling snowboard boots and bindings too, improving those as he had snowboards. Getting buyers interested in the boards was one thing. Getting ski resort operators to let boarders on their mountains was quite another. Most places banned them, regarding riders as renegades following a fad.
We'd be driving up to little villages up, say, Bromley Mountain in southern Vermont, where you could drive sort of a quarter of the way up the mountain and then snowboard down the trails at night. I mean, we weren't allowed near the place in the daytime. We didn't even consider asking.
But eventually, Burton did exactly that. He went to resort owners, demoed his snowboards, and pleaded for snowboarders to have access. Most said no way. But in 1984, the manager at Stratton Mountain in Vermont went against the tide. He talked to the ski resort's owners about Burton and his snowboards.
Nobody wants you on the hill, but nobody had a good reason not to have you on the hill, so I'm going to give you a chance.
Young skiers took notice of the unconventional snow sport and increasingly gave Burton's boards a try.
You just do a bunch of beginner skiers that had never done it. People would just think it was a joke, and that was sort of where we were at. But then people just got better at it.
And bought more boards. 6 years after carving snowboards in the Vermont barn, Burton reached $1 million in sales. In 1984, shortly after Stratton Mountain opened its lift lines to snowboarders, Burton went to Europe, where the sport was gaining in popularity.
Europe was much more easier going about the whole thing, and they didn't really embrace it, but they said, yeah, sure, if you want to go down the mountain, go, whatever.
By the end of 1985, Burton's profits jumped to $5 million. But Burton and the sport of snowboarding were just out of the gate. In 1988, one of the first national snowboarding championships was held at Stratton Mountain. It would later become the U.S. Open, regarded as the most important competition in the sport.
People would all see the best riders in the world. They'd say, wow, I didn't know that you could do that on a snowboard. And that had a lot to do with promoting the sport and educating people on what the sport was capable of doing.
It also gave the world a look at what Burton Snowboards was capable of accomplishing. By the early 90s, revenues at his company were soaring to well over $75 million a year. Millions were flocking to the sport as well. By 1998, snowboarding became an Olympic sport as boarders competed in the games in Japan. By 2002, it was a medal sport. The riders who took the gold were sponsored by Burton. Burton Snowboards was a worldwide force by the end of the millennium, responsible for nearly 30% of the market in some 33 countries. Today, Burton remains the industry leader in snowboarding, selling boards, boots, bindings, goggles, and an entire line of jackets and outerwear. Those boards retail from $300 to nearly $1,000 each. In 2011, the company reached nearly $500 million in revenue.